We'll go ahead and get started. And looks like we hit that just about perfect in terms of that big crush of people coming aboard. Today's going to be really interesting. I think we're going to have a good time with the guests that we're bringing in. Last week, I told you we were going to do more in the way of guests. I'm not sure exactly all of them that will show up today, but I invited a fair group of people, and I hope to present them to you. Before we do that, I got a couple of housekeeping things I need to go through. One of them has to do with a long and involved situation on the Examiner that I think we've kind of put a pin in. It's not a satisfactory pin, but it is a pin nevertheless, and so it is what it is. So look, it turns out that SPD, the underlying daemon, which we inherited from the other project, by the way, we've done some work on it, but not an awful lot. At some point, I think we will go back and completely rewrite SPD in many ways. SPD is the daemon, which actually does provide hosting capability for both DIY and Examiner units. It turns out that the daemon has always, or at least since modern times, let's say 5x and beyond, has had this deal where it does a polling of the drives, and the polling happens on a clock, and it's a very fast clock. It's 3 times per second. And most people don't notice it because it doesn't really, do anything. It's just polling the drives themselves to make sure they're available and so forth. I'm not even exactly sure why it does the polling, but it's been there, and it's been there all along, and it's there on all platforms, and it's just there. Well, we had this thing happen a couple of weeks back where a guy who received an Examiner from batch 1 was pretty frustrated with a feature in the unit that we had not really seen, but he called it ticking. And when we kind of looked at a video of it, what happens is that there are 8 lights on the front of an Examiner today, and the 4 bottom ones, the ones underneath each drive, would essentially go tick, tick, tick like that in terms of highlighting this polling event that was going on. And, it really wasn't a thing that seemed like all that big of a deal. As we looked into it, the drives were fine. We went through and we did a bunch of testing on drives. We checked it out on different motherboards. We checked it out on different operating systems. We checked it out with different versions of Supervisor, Super Admin, and SPD. And ultimately, it just continued to show up. And, at the end of the day, we realized it's a feature, not a bug. I mean, it's just part of the thing. Why did it really kind of become present lately and it wasn't there early on? Well, this was part of our supply chaining. So when we first actually started selling the Examiners last year, they were using one backplane inside of the units. And a backplane is this little PCB circuit board which connects the SATA-based drives to the motherboard. And the original backplane only had 4 LEDs on it, which just showed drive status. And so, in fact, we even had a customer in Hawaii last year who ultimately decided to bail out and ask for a refund because he got 2 units, and one unit had the new backplane with colored lights below that flashed on and off, and the first one didn't, and it really frustrated him to no end because he felt like he was being cheated. I willingly and happily gave him his money back and said, thank you, no thank you. But the deal is that somewhere in the middle of our batch ordering, the Chinese vendor who builds our chassis substituted in this secondary backplane, which did have these extra LEDs. And I don't know if it's a quality issue or if it's a design issue or if it's whatever. I'm going to have a long conversation about it. We did get a new backplane already from them, so I have to do some testing on the new backplane. It may already be solved, but essentially what happens is that as this polling's going on, the LEDs are being banged on, and this little transistor is essentially just really rapidly ticking on and ticking off. And for the most part, you're not going to really notice it. You're just not. But some of you people live in libraries, and You bought a miner and expected it to be dead silent. And apparently your wife is going to divorce you if it's not. And so what we've done is we've essentially got a situation where some people are contacting us and saying, "Oh my gosh, I cannot live with this, infernal ticking noise." And in some units, we found that it's a little louder than others. And that's kind of been what's been the frustrating part. It's not overly loud, to be frank. But if there's nothing else going on in the environment, yeah, it could be annoying. And it's one of those things like the first time you notice it, then you can't unnotice it. And so it becomes a situation. It is what it is at this point. And if it's on your unit in terms of a volume that is, ever present or whatever, my recommendation is put the unit away in a closet and take it off the coffee table. It's not meant to be a decorative device. Put it up next to an ASIC, which is really loud, and we'll mask it, or whatever. It doesn't really matter, but it's not a problem, quote unquote, that we're going to fix, quote unquote. We may ultimately get a different backplane going forward that is, less sort of, noisy, so to speak. But that's not a guarantee. If we can, we will. If we can't, who cares? As long as the system continues to function correctly, that's all that matters. We didn't even ask for that light, and frankly, I didn't want it on there because it's fucking green, and I hate green. So at the end of the day, it's there. It is what it is. If we can change it, we will. If we can't, we won't. But anyway, bit of housekeeping. Let me see. Everybody asking about where the Examiner Batch 2 is. I'm grinding through a contract with TaxJar right now for doing taxes across the United States. I'm almost completed on it, and I believe that I'll have that done here probably today. I'm hoping to pull the trigger on this week. The overseas part is also kind of amusing, annoying. I don't know what word you want to insert. Right now we have a situation where if we do DDU, it makes all of you people mad, and it makes UPS mad, and it makes my rep mad, and it makes everybody mad. And unfortunately, I'm the person that ends up having to deal with all the madness. And what that means is I sell you a unit for $3,500, you get it over there, and all of a sudden UPS contacts you and says customs needs, $400 or $500 for VAT taxes, and then you're mad at me because I didn't tell you about it. And it is what it is. So what we need to do is to include that calculation directly in the sale. TaxJar will do that. What it won't do is it won't actually pay your government those taxes. So I'm setting up all the accounts right now with Canada and IOSS for EU and the Eastern European countries, and Australia has its own GST. And so I've got to set up these accounts across the board so that I can pay all these different people. There is a service out there that will do that. There are a couple of them actually, but they're pretty expensive. And at the end of the day, we're probably not yet big enough to really justify throwing a whole bunch of money at automating these processes. We're probably just going to have to bite the bullet and work a little harder on our end and get that done. But the good news is if you buy an Examiner going out of this batch and you're in the overseas contingent, you will pay up front. You'll pay more than your neighbor paid in America. But at the end of the day, you won't have to pay when the brown truck shows up. And I won't have to get troubled by their goofy customs broker people who can't seem to figure out how to make sure that 2,000 is 2,000 and not 20,000, so that a unit doesn't show up in Belgium demanding $4,800 from the customer in VAT taxes, and then the customs people won't budge. This actually happened. And the unit actually is now on its way back to me. I sent a new unit out to the customer because for some reason in Belgium, the customs brokers can't figure out how to change a mistake they made on a form. And there you go. That's how that's our life for right now, by the way. So anyway, that's going on. If all goes well, perhaps tomorrow, I might even open up a couple of units today. We are selling across the board on all the different payment rails, credit cards, PayPal, crypto. We will have a discount for crypto. We will have a surcharge for PayPal. All of the credit card, PayPal stuff will go on a 30-day clock. If we don't ship within 30 days, we're going to have to go back and reauthorize your card. It's going to be a pain in the ass, but some of you people don't like crypto. And I guess with the way the market's dropped recently, I guess it's potentially understandable. But you really ought to get into crypto. It's a nice thing, for your own sovereignty and financial well-being. But if you got to use a credit card, there's going to be some, stuff going on there. I think we have about 50 units right now in stock. So I literally could open up the store right now and sell 50 units right off the thing, and they would ship almost immediately. They would ship probably early next week. But you got to wait just another day or two. So there you go. Okay, let's see here. All right, well, that's about it for the housekeeping. What we're going to do today is we're going to welcome in a couple of different folks. I'm going to start with Henry from our team. And what we're going to do is we're going to talk a little bit about the relayer and the onboarding process, because a number of you sort of don't yet understand what the relayer is and what it does, and so forth. First of all, just before we get started on that, this time, it seems like this time and then the early time slot for the sort of Eastern Bloc folks got equal votes across the board. I decided to do it a little bit later because I'm hoping to make this potentially a workable meeting for the East Coasters. But looking at the numbers, I'm not sure if that's true or not. It may be the case, may not be the case. We may have to try another 8 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time session just to see what those look like. And then if it has to happen, then maybe we bite the bullet and we go back to doing staggered meetings. Because I noticed that the numbers have dropped off, pretty significantly as we've stayed solely European focused here. And I certainly don't want to cut anybody out, although maybe it's everybody's listening to the recordings, and so that's why it's what it is. But then you don't get to come up on stage and fumble around and not be able to find your fucking mic. So anyway, here we are. Henry, let me invite you up to the stage. Let me first get rid of this Fred Boat dude. For those that have not met Henry or were not aware of Henry or just didn't know his name was Henry or whatever, Henry has been a longtime community member in the project we forked from, and then of course he was with us. Then he went off to kind of finish his college studies, and then when he got out, we decided to bring him aboard, kind of in a pretty jack of all trades type role. It wasn't even really clear exactly what he was going to do when he first came in. But I think we're really fleshing it out now, and it's primarily going to be around product work, product marketing, product management, maybe. And one of those features tends to be onboarding, because that's a thing right now that's really turning into the next phase. We showed off the product as it is, but there's a step to get from, using sort of the network and actually being able to use it productively. You have to stand up a relayer. Remember, the relayer is the core of all of this. And so somewhere along the line, you have to be able to configure a relayer, set up a relayer, and manage and maintain a relayer. There will be all different kinds of ways that people do this going forward. Some will just go ahead and purchase VMs, maybe even from AWS, by the way, and then run relayers there. Some will run relayers on equipment that they have internally. Some will buy a 1U relayer from us that's just already set up, and all they have to do is just plug it in and go. Some will go ahead and, when we do this, we're not offering it today, but if they're small enough, mom and pop type shop, they may just run a cloud-based relayer with us. And then there's just a number of sort of ways that you can set up. You might run a clustered relayer if you're a big organization where you have multiple relayers all talking to each other. You may run multiple relayers at different headquarters in order to service different, divisions of a company or different regional or geolocations of the company. And remember, what the relayer does the relayer goes out and picks and chooses all the storage providers that it's going to include in its erasure coding set. The relayer doesn't do contracting. Contracting is done through a central server that contracts with all the providers, and then the relayers pick and choose from those providers. So I brought Henry in today, and what we're going to do is we're going to talk a little bit about this process that we're going through called onboarding right now. And so if you're somebody that's in that list who signed up for the trial, or if after this you decide to sign up for the trial, this is going to be the process for a couple of weeks while we kind of continue to shake out product launch and then ultimately turn it over to a live. Anybody can just log in, buy, set up a relayer, and go. We're close to that, but we need to go through a couple more weeks of this onboarding process. How you doing today, Henry?
I'm doing well, thank you.
You're a bass player?
I have been known to. Yep, I was at a rock concert the other night, so I've been freshly inspired to keep playing.
World needs more bass players. World needs less guitar players, definitely. So, good thing. So look, you're tasked with setting up relayers, and if I remember correctly, at the trade show in Vegas, you were doing demos. Do you find the process of standing up and working with a relayer now the way we have it to be a relatively friendly process? Maybe you could just sort of describe that process a little bit to us.
Sure. So everybody that wants to get started with the relayer begins with creating an account on our website. So once they've created the kind of console account, that's the central management place that's kind of similar to if you're using AWS or you were using a different cloud service. That would be kind of the management console where you handle billing, you handle your different deployments. Once you're over there, that's where you get your link to download the relayer software. And that's where kind of the instructions begin. So we have right now a pretty extensively guided written like resource that kind of explains what Exanet services is. It explains what the relayer is, and then there's kind of a complete walkthrough of how to install the relayer on your own machine, how to get started, how to start interfacing it with your different S3 apps. So overall, I'd say the experience so far has been somewhat similar to what I remember kind of the getting people set up a storage providing is. So some people are coming in with lots of experience. Some people are coming in with not a lot of experience and not a great, not a lot of exposure to what it is we're doing here. So I'm happy to kind of introduce them to some of the ideas. It seems one thing that really stands out to me, it definitely seems that when I actually kind of break everything down and explain to them what we're doing here, how it's unique, some of our innovations, they really seem like keen and interested. So that's always awesome to see, and kind of reinforces that we're on the right track here. But yeah, so I'd say once it's set up, it's really powerful. So one of the things that I'm gonna have to do on my end is get more familiar with all these S3 apps, because for those of you who don't know, when we say kind of S3 app, the kind of meaning of that, Amazon kind of pioneered a lot of the cloud services industry with their like Amazon Web Services S3 service, and that protocol kind of became a de facto standard in the industry. So there's all sorts of different applications now that all use that protocol, and that's what we natively support. So if you're using like Veeam, Duplicati, there's so many other like S3 protocol applications that you can use in order to kind of leave your existing workflow intact, but just swap out to a relayer. So one of the ones that I've set up here on my machine, I have rclone using my relayer bucket as a drive. So now in Windows, when I open up my my Windows file manager, or like the file explorer, I have my hard drive, and then right next to it, I have the X drive, which is what I labeled it. But it's I just see my relayer application as a normal drive in Windows, so I can drag files over to it. I can open things. it's really simple and natively kind of shows up in Windows, and that's possible through one of thousands of S3 applications.
Yeah, okay. I'm just actually copy and pasting from the documentations right now into the events window while you're chatting. So using something like rclone right now, when you're tied into this, does it feel once you get into a third party application like that? Let's say rclone, Duplicati, I don't care, Veeam, whatever. Do you have to make like some crazy major concessions to doing work differently? Do you have to like, is there some big hurdles you have to get over in order to work with our cloud versus working with any other cloud, AWS or whatever, or is the experience pretty consistent?
So I'd say when you first configured it, when you're setting it up, definitely what we are encouraging at this point is to kind of understand how the relayer works and its different kind of performing characteristics. So I'd say the first couple times, and kind of when people are first deploying it, starting to use it with their own applications, they are kind of watching it with a bit of an eagle eye, and they're monitoring like CPU usage, RAM usage, all of that. And that's just because it's this new thing that doesn't really exist yet, or hasn't existed yet. Uh, so people are just kind of getting a feel for how it performs. They're watching their network output, that sort of thing, which I would expect. But I think we're also kind of reaching a point where once you've done that for a little bit and you've seen it run and you kind of know what the deal is, then you can just kind of leave it running in the background and kind of forget about it and just keep using your application how you already were. And I think that's the end, like that's the long-term goal. That's the long tail of the kind of usage that we're going to see.
That'll typically be an IT manager or somebody who is in control of the IT operations in an organization that goes through and learns all that and does all that. And then ultimately, when they turn over the keys to somebody who's doing like weekly backups or whatever, or any kind of archival, services, those folks won't really have any of that. They'll just know they have to go into the menu of whatever app they're working on, and it'll all be configured to just go ahead and upload. So they won't probably notice any difference from any other cloud that they've already been working on, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So at this point, it is generally more involved. So the kind of people that are setting up relayers are the kind of people that are evaluating them, and it is kind of the person who's configuring it, which is really more of an IT admin role, is also the person who's using it, which might be someone else in a real organization. But definitely in like real world use case, the whole relayer management and deployment, that would all be handled by like qualified IT people. We would have resources for them. And the idea or the goal is that the end users and the existing workflows, nobody really has to know that it's even in use. It's one of those things where when it's doing its job well, you don't really know it's doing anything at all. And that's kind of how it should be, because who really, well, I guess other than us, who really wakes up in the morning and thinks about cloud services? It's not that sexy of a thing. I think what we're doing is really cool, but at the end of the day, it's a tool that needs to achieve a goal, and if it's doing that well, then generally doesn't attract too much attention to itself, unless you are kind of in the IT side. So that is kind of the direction I would expect things to head. That it is generally used and monitored and operated by the more kind of IT side, and then the people who are kind of responsible for the workflows and are potentially uploading the data, accessing the buckets, that kind of thing. They don't really have to know much about how it works at all.
So right now, what the process is that what we have this link on the website, which it's essentially sign on or sign up, and when you go through that, it takes you currently to just a simple form, sign up for the trial. And so what'll end up happening? We've got about, I don't know, I guess there's like 30 potential names in there. We've emailed most of those 30 now to tell them that their trial's ready and that they can come in and and give it a spin and go forth. And what's happening there is we've got coupons for 5 free terabytes for them to come in and to give it that sort of test drive. So if you're in that group, if you did submit one of those trial forms and you have not heard from us, check your spam folder, because it's quite likely you missed an email from us, Exonet Sales Services, or Exonet Services Sales. And ultimately, we have contacted all of those folks to come and join the Discord and, to run through the quick setup. Ultimately, what's going to happen is right now we have this set of docs, which I highlighted and linked in the events channel. But what we'll end up doing here very shortly is Henry will transition in after he gets a number of people stood up. Right now, what we're doing is setting up a private channel for each individual trialer, walking them through the process of standing up a relayer, showing them how it works, showing them what best practices look like, giving them links to the guides, blah, blah, blah. And what'll end up happening as we kind of finish that process up, we'll understand what we have to tweak and tune in the creation of relayers, standing them up process, and then we'll tweak and tune that. We'll streamline it. We'll get the devs to make some changes. We'll do whatever. And then Henry will transition into this place where he starts doing essentially these little, 1 to 5 minute training videos. And the training videos will, let's take the general relayer subsystems. And so, like, for instance, there'll be some very generic overview type vids, like standing it up, what's the best place to put one, how do you, download Windows or Linux, and, all the different questions that will come up will get covered. So configuration. Then we'll have one that will be specific, a training video about host.io, or a training video that will be specific about the database and how do you back up the database and what kinds of parameters do you need to set up for the database. And what does the database love? Does it love memory? Does it love processor? And we know all the answers to that. So these videos will help to get you guys up and running really quickly. And if you're an MSP type person or a consultant who's going to be recommending these to other people, these training videos will become almost linchpin keys for you to be able to sell the service. Now, let's talk real quickly about, this whole notion of the relayer, because one of the things I'm pretty convinced of is there's going to be some almost immediate pushback when people realize they have to run a relayer, because they don't have to run a relayer on other services. But in some cases, they end up running, quote unquote, a relayer. So like Cloudian is a pretty good example. If you're running the Cloudian service, which provides a lot of, sort of capabilities into the uploading of data, the protection of data, the performance profile that you're going to use, the cache availability of data across your platform once you do get it uploaded. Their typical MO is to sell you a 4U rack, and that box has their software and it has their, some storage drives and their caching architecture and so forth. And there's a couple of those that are out there. So what we're doing is not unheard of. But then what ends up happening is that when you put this relayer in place, we actually do have something that's pretty unique from the rest of the world. What we have just put out there is a distributed renter, which is somebody nobody else has right now. Yeah, people like Firebase can say we've developed layer 2 into SIA and storage, but it just isn't a thing. All it is just a centralized caching layer that they put on AWS or whatever, cloud service, some kind of mixture of Nginx, Cloudflare, and whatever backend data center they're using. It's centralized access into a decentralized network, which makes no sense to me, but maybe it makes sense to somebody else. In our case, we're actually giving you control of your data. The relayer puts the control of the data in the customer's hands. We never see the data. It doesn't come through our door. It stays on your network until it goes up sharded and encrypted onto the network. And so that is a big, big, big game changer. And when it ultimately gets revealed to the rest of the world of what we're doing here, I think this will be a really sort of beautiful instantiation people will love. And then, that opens the door to Web3, by the way, because in 2 years or whenever people are amenable to it, we'll be able to push contracting out to individual relayers. And then those relayers will be essentially self-service mechanisms for people to access the decentralized network, and will be miles ahead of everybody else then as well. So even though it seems like we're the tortoise in this equation, I think if you really dig down deep, you're going to find out we're actually the guys in front. And once people realize we're the guys in front, I think things are going to start to change for us pretty significantly. All right. So, Henry, what kind of hiccups or stumbling blocks or holes, or what are some things that you've seen, early on and quickly where people sort of get tripped up using this mechanism we've developed?
I'd say there's some of the kind of silliness that just generally we just kind of need to figure out. So it's things like when you start the relayer, sometimes Windows makes you do it in you have to run as administrator, or it won't quite work right. So it's those kinds of like goofy issues that isn't really our side that's responsible. It's kind of Windows, but it's just some kind of teething issues like that, or like when the different subsystems start up, sometimes Windows will block like the gateway module or something. I've seen some of that being a thing, but other than that, I'd say for the most part, it's just kind of that our resources are continuing to evolve. I mean, anyone who's ever worked on documentation knows that documentation is never really done. You just get to a point where it needs to go out into the world until you can spend more time on it again. So I'd say continuing to kind of improve and hone the setup guides. I think video is going to be a big breakthrough. So once people can just kind of see like, oh, that's how like you navigate the menus and jump from this place to this place, and that's where you see, okay, that's where you control the amount of data shards, the parity shards, just kind of seeing it all fit together. I think that would do a lot for helping people kind of get the whole picture. So that's something we're working on now. But I think with the existing kind of guide that we have now, people are getting like 99% of the way there. And then just sometimes there's, just issues like Windows is blocking something. And that's maybe the 1% that, is still kind of being ironed out and offering in different mediums as well. So different videos or video medium. Potentially, it might be in the future for different languages as well. We have one of our benefits of having a kind of globally diverse community is we have lots of awesome, super knowledgeable members that are happy to help out, that speak, I mean, some of them like 3-4 languages, which is always very impressive to monolingual me. So, I mean, we'll see where things kind of go. But at this point, there aren't really any major traps or holes that people are falling into.
And one of the interesting things we already have on our Examiner next build that's about to be released is we actually have a chat module that's already working in the Examiner where you can go right from your UI and talk to a support agent back on our side. And it's natural that we'll roll that out for the relayers as well. So if you're there and you need to actually change some parameter, you should be able to log into the chat window and get somebody and get almost instant help there, assuming we have somebody on call and on staff. We're going to talk about those guys here in a little bit. But how hard is it, would you characterize the process, let's say, of setting up your cache sizing and, determining how to use drives and drive sizing and all of that stuff? How would you characterize the process we've set up currently for configuring all of that stuff?
I'd say it can seem kind of intimidating at the front because in the guides, I mean, if you're looking through it now, it was linked elsewhere. I think in the events channel. When you kind of reach to the stage of the guide where you have to start setting up your configuration, so that's where you specify your like your data shard parameters, If you want to use a custom like set of providers, that's where you would do that, where you point where you want your cache to live. There are kind of once you have the relayer like installed and you're kind of poking through the options before you start it up. I'd say that's probably the most intimidating step, where there's all of a sudden, like 8 different configurations or 8 different settings that you're being asked to kind of tweak before you start it up for the first time. So I'd say that's maybe an area where we try to do as much as we can to make that kind of graceful and maybe have some suggested settings. And uh, yeah, we're definitely open to ideas and kind of helping streamline that. But I'd say for the most part, I mean, when a button says install, it installs. When a button says start up, it starts up. It isn't too crazy.
So one of the things that I think we're going to end up hearing from customers, and I think we'll be well positioned and ready to handle this. We've already lined up this 1U device. We like it. It's got a great form factor in terms of how deep the rack mount is, and it's a good quality brand, and we have the capability to do pretty powerful Xeons and a lot of memory because relayers love memory. So one of the things that I think is going to end up happening here is just like examiners, it's quite likely that a lot of people are going to say, well, just, sell me a relayer already configured and I'll just pop it in. And that way everything will be already set up and maybe a wizard will walk me through to do a couple of parameter changes and so forth. But I won't have to do an awful lot of configuration or maintenance. And I think that's going to be a thing. So it's quite likely what will happen is that we will roll for about 3 to 4 weeks of manual onboarding, Henry developing videos, us putting together various software updates to sort of like finalize the relayer instantiation. And then at that point, we'll probably launch the pre-order list for the 1U relayer rack mounts and begin offering those for sale almost immediately. So at that point in time, by the way, when we do that, it's also likely that's when the for-profit sales of the cloud storage product will also go live. So what you're really likely looking at here is that by the time we enter Q2 and get into it maybe 1 to 2 weeks, 3 weeks, we will actually have 4 legitimate products on offer and for sale. And we're a crypto project, remember? So we'll have 4 real world products for sale, generating revenues for our corp, and all, as you know, all those revenues go back into primarily software development to make the distributed data center more robust, more powerful, more whatever. Remember, the corp has to buy SCP in order to power this whole thing. So that will be where some of the money goes. So just a number of those sorts of things that we have to do. Anyway, I appreciate you stopping by, Henry, and Henry's always in the channel. So if you're looking for some more guidance on this stuff, feel free to ask. I think we're probably about ready to set up a relayer public channel in the community, and we'll get that set up so that you folks can start talking about it, even playing with them, and kind of getting an understanding of what those are all about. So appreciate your time today, Henry, and we'll move on to our next guest.
Yeah, thanks.
Whoops. All right, so let's see here. I got a choice. I think I'm going to choose the support people, and then I'll do the video promotion people last. So let me see if I can find support people. Maybe support team, you can raise your hands because I'm not. Okay, here's one right here. Here's my friend Spark. I don't see him. I wish they'd put this stuff in alphabetical order. Yes, he looks like he raised his hand. There we go. And the other guy's sleeping, so that's okay. All right, I've invited you guys to speak. You got to come up on stage. There's one. Tony, come up on stage. Scratchy or no? You're here? commit.
Hey Ken, can you hear me now?
We can.
Sorry, iPad's microphone settings mess about with.
All right. So, look, I want to introduce everybody to our support team that we've currently sort of instantiated. I want to talk a little bit about what the support team really means and what it doesn't mean. Probably more importantly, I think if you've had need for some support, you've run across these guys. It's quite likely that you've been pretty impressed if you have. I've been really impressed, to be honest with you, because I didn't really think that it was going to be the way it's turned out. I thought, there would be some good solid effort put in, but nothing like I've seen. And so I'm pretty excited about it. And that's pretty, to say that about a support, division, I think is pretty cool. We have two of the three individuals here today. Sparky is Mark and Tony is Tony. And the original idea, before I go ahead and have them sort of account for themselves, I just want to tell you what our process was in choosing these guys. So I put a thing out there a while back saying we're looking for some support people, and I got about, I don't know, it was like 15 or 16 names that raised their hands and said they wanted to do this. And then what I did is I just kind of watched for about 3 weeks to see who was actually providing assistance to different people as it was and so forth. And what ended up happening was the people that actually were providing support services free, right? And who would have done it anyway, whether or not we engaged them, well, I chose them, right? There were some guys that applied for this sort of thing, and they weren't even blue. They didn't have their wings. That you never see them talking in the channels. Apparently, they just wanted a paycheck, and to me, that didn't make any sense. And I think it was the right answer and the right sort of direction because, as you can see, we're getting just some amazing level support. Sometimes I have to jump in and kind of like back down some of the more goofy support stuff that comes along, but because these guys are too nice and will sort of sometimes let everybody just say and do whatever they want. But at the end of the day, I think ultimately it's going real well. So how do you guys feel? Let's start with you, Tony. Do you think it's going well? Oh, you have to unmute, not mute. Okay, Mark, let's go to you then. How do you think it's going?
Yeah, so from my point of view, I mean, I joined this project back in January, and as you say, I was kind of getting involved, helping people where I could. And for me, it's just something that I kind of enjoy doing. I'm a bit of a tech nerd at heart, and yeah, just enjoyed helping out, getting people, getting their providers working, getting people educated at the same time so they understand how things work, which I think is important for especially the DIY community, so that they don't actually need support in the future. They can fix their issues themselves. So yeah, I'm really enjoying how things are working out. I think between Tony Fox and I, we've got good coverage. Plus, obviously the community support guys like Jeff and Geordie and people like that to jump in and help people out just off their own back.
Yeah, and I'll just address those two names actually specifically because those two names actually are a bit interesting. Yes, those two names actually do an awful lot of extracurricular help. Geordie with the Telegram group primarily, and Jeff doing a lot of assistance across the channels here in the Discord primarily. And both of those are stakeholders in the corporation. So I chose not to cloud those waters or muddy those waters in terms of getting them involved in terms of being support personnel and so forth, because this thing with support is going to continue to evolve. And a couple of things that we'll end up doing is, just like we're having master start to work on some 2 to 3 to 5 minute videos for relayer usage. I also think it makes sense that we start doing 2 to 3 to 5 minute videos that are from the corp itself on our specific software and our hardware components to show people how to set up, how to do routing, how to do port forwarding, how to do that stuff. How do you feel about transitioning a little bit out of the answering the same questions over and over again and just pointing people to a YouTube video?
Yeah, I mean that's where the next step is. I think is again educating people and providing good documentation, good videos that people can follow themselves, which is something that Jeff and I started doing off our own back for the sort of DIY community, and obviously for things like the examiners going forward as well. It's a great idea because people want to be able to set these things up themselves, and if they watch a video and see how it's done, it gives them confidence to just go for it and to do it themselves. And only when you get outside of things in the normal working state, do they then need to call and support. So it makes our jobs easier because we don't have to handhold everyone through the process. So yeah, I think that's going to be the next big step going forward to get that side of things fulfilled.
And I think our idea originally was, we looked at Tony and we said, been helping a lot of people out. Also got an interesting profile in that he's over in, sort of Southeast Asia, Australia type territory, time zoning. You are in the UK, if I remember correctly. And then our third person, Flux, is actually in Seattle. So the whole idea was sort of to scale the globe in terms of time zoning in order to try and have some coverage. It hasn't totally worked out that way, but I think ultimately it will sort of follow that mode. Are you there yet, Tony? Still figuring out his mic. The other thing that I want to just mention here about the whole support process and the way it's kind of working for everybody. So right now, it's pretty much support is primarily 90% solving the same problem over and over again with this routing situation. And so we're going to continue from a development standpoint to work on that. We'll work on getting more materials that make it less needing a hand-holding kind of a thing. But one of the things that's going to happen as we go forward is everything that's called an examiner will end up being frontline supported by these folks and potentially more if we need it. And then everything that isn't an examiner, i.e. everything that didn't buy a license or be an actual examiner, will end up in a channel like support other, for lack of a better title for right now. And ultimately, I'm not saying we won't help people in that channel, but that channel will ultimately be left more to the community to self-support and become more of a thing, because ultimately those people are going to be focused on data that doesn't originate with us, and it's going to be data that we aren't going to know where it's coming from or why. And ultimately, if there are people still out there doing that kind of DIY non-licensed, ultimately they're going to have to become more self-sufficient in supporting themselves. So one of the great things about the examiner support is, as I said, in the full version and in the hardware, there's going to be it's already completed, this chat windows, so you'll be able to talk directly to an agent. And ultimately, you'll be able to go right from your window to a tech without having to necessarily even join a Discord and to go through that process. So that whole idea of being able to support people directly in their units themselves, how do you feel about that, Mark?
Yeah, I mean that's where ultimately we need to get to as the company grows and things, to become a little bit more professional, if you like. Obviously, Discord's one thing for a crypto project, but to become a proper company and things, we need to kind of do support in a proper way. So yeah, getting that support directly from your XA miner GUI and things, we'll take out the Discord. Where for people who are not familiar with Discord or don't want to sign up to it and things, and we'll make that process easy for them for sure.
And ultimately, right now, what we're doing, instead of sort of a ticketing process, we're just making private channels for people that have obscure type problems or special hardware problems. But the future ultimately will be a ticketing system. Do you have a background with that kind of thing?
Yeah, so I come from a networking background, so I've worked at Cisco in my past life and currently work for Arista, a data center company. So that cases and that sort of thing is kind of very familiar to me. So that's obviously another big ticket item for us to get a proper ticketing system and sort of software bug tracking system things in place to track these cases, and also a year down the line, it's useful to be able to track trends of what sort of hardware failures we had, what sort of software issues people had. If you've got all that in a database, which you can then start to get information from for long-term trends, that again helps to then focus software development in the right direction to fix common issues.
Cool. So I'm not going to go too much further with this. I'll let you, if you have anything else you want to share with the community, definitely you can. I just wanted to essentially put sort of a voice to a screen name and so forth, since I know that almost half the people in here that are new likely encountered you guys as far as getting some support and getting online. So this puts that voice to the name. Anything else you want to share?
No, just a big thanks to all the community for making this like an enjoyable process. That's kind of why I got involved in this, because I actually enjoy it. I'm not here for the Lambo, making a fortune on crypto. I'm actually just here to enjoy it. So yeah, thanks everyone for making
You're
it.
you're doing an amazing job. That's just what I want to say.
Thanks.
So really appreciate you being here, and I'll now move on to the next phase of our show. Let me check the audience here because I got to see if my other guy's here. I don't think he is, but if he is, no, it doesn't look like he is. Okay, so I have David here. You know him as NerdyDudeStuff. He was with us in Las Vegas. I know he's a little controversial. Actually, there's been some people who have had expressed different opinions. First of all, what I want to do before I let David chat is I want to kind of explain something again or reiterate something again back in what happened in December. If you remember, what was happening is we were selling examiners out of stock from our, that we had, and we really weren't advertising them. We weren't marketing them at all. They were just out there. And then some guy named Fonz Fines found one, and he didn't buy one. He just actually did a video on what he thought it was. It was a pretty good video, and it actually was a pretty honest video, and it did a pretty good job. And so that brought a few more people into the project and got some people sniffing around interested, thinking, okay, there's this passive income thing. And then we had a couple of folks show up who did this sort of stuff for a living, the passive income mining and these kind of these different sort of miners that were not ASICs and so forth. And Nerdy Dude Guy is Dude Stuff is that kind of individual. And so those guys went out and prepared videos based on the Exa miner. They ended up, the two guys, Action CEO and Nerdy Dude, both put together videos. And we didn't ask them to. We didn't go out there and say, would you do this for us? And please put this information in there, and please don't put this, So we were kind of rudely surprised when, these things showed up and they were sort of like saying, something that seemingly was different from our message. But that isn't really fair, because if you go back and you watch all their videos and you listen, closely and clearly, and it's not even, you don't have to it's not like fine print. They both clearly said what the story was here. They both clearly said, look, yeah, if you filled up your device immediately and early with the current incentives the way they are, you would make this much money per month. And yeah, it's true. But, it also said, doesn't look like the service is live yet. right? And probably going to take a little while once it goes live on where it is. So I'd like to let you say something right now, David, because I think ultimately you've done a pretty good job in representing us, even though there are a couple of people that might disagree with that. I don't think there was ever any kind of motivation or desire or anything to do anything other than represent this for what it is. Is that how you see it?
That's 100% correct. I really enjoyed the platform, and it's just something that was very attractive to me. So I wanted to get the unboxing video, and then everything else has just been my experience and my day-to-day journey with SCP. And then give me 1 second. Give me just 2 seconds, guys. Hang on 1 second.
His mom is making him take the garbage out.
Thing coming up, and I knew it would be my turn to talk as soon as the thing came up.
Now she's having him clean the garage. Okay, well, I'll go ahead and riff a little bit while we have some dead air here. Essentially, the thing that we ended up doing out of those videos is we decided to go ahead and engage him to come out to Las Vegas and work with us to actually deliver the presentations that we did from the trade show floor. And I think did a pretty good job of it. I think ultimately the sessions and the stuff that was delivered was pretty good. Looks like you're back now. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, good job on the riffing. I know we talked about that in Vegas, and that's kind of what our interview was. So awesome. So anyway, yeah. So when I discovered you guys, I know we had a conversation about content and what where I was building up my information and what I wanted to provide, and I knew that there was we didn't want to pull the trigger, and I didn't want to come off shilly. And I know one big thing that you expressed to me was please, we don't want you to be a shill. We love the content, but just don't shill, because that's just not what we're here for, and that's not something I like to do on my channel. So I know that I was able to get my hands on one through you guys, and I did the unboxing video, and I think honestly that was the only obligation to anything to per our conversation that I had. And then any video after that was my experience with it. So when we saw the calculator that was built with the incentives, of course, as a YouTuber, and to try to get more people aware in the project, I went clickbaity, but at the same time, as long as, there, like you said, there wasn't any fine print, I was very articulate and clear with what I would say, that this isn't, 100% numbers. This project isn't live yet. I know we're shooting for these target dates for it to go live, but if this was a perfect world and this happened right now, I'm saying on the video, this is how much we would be making. So that's just kind of the attention grabbing stuff that I was trying to get, and hopefully it built the community. And I know that there's some controversy with the people that want to be true data storage providers and do data and don't like crypto, and look at me as a YouTuber going, oh, he's just here to earn passive income and doesn't care about the project. He just wants the coin to go up and be a moon boy and buy a Lambo. That's not the case. I love the little device. As soon as mine went down, my schedule was a little tight, so I couldn't just jump into support. And you were talking about the support and the IT tickets, and I had that 100% experience with SCP. And we got my device up and running and back and chugging along and holding data. So it's just a project that I absolutely love, and it's one of my favorites. And I had a great time in Vegas, and really appreciated you guys offering me the opportunity to be your YouTuber and to bring content and live streams. And it was an all around great time. You have a great team. Everyone I met was just fantastic. So truly, truly appreciated.
So I think we're going to do another, batch here in the next day or two, and it probably would be helpful for the community to get some kind of where are we now type video.
To do what was that? More inventory?
No, to get a where are we now, or an update video out there that kind of, as we launch the batch 2, to sort of say, okay, how did it all work out? I positioned this thing, or I showed it to you guys last December, and where are we now that it's summer or May or whatever of 2022, and we're about to go into a new batch 2. might be able to kind of tell your audience, how things have worked out, and maybe
Okay.
even talk to some of your viewers and get the experience of how they've perceived things.
Oh, absolutely. I think that would be that would be a great content video. We pull up where the data was for December 2021, how many providers there were. We can look at DIYs, the GCD miners, in tandem with the SCP and the EXA miners. I think that would be some good content.
Cool. All right. Well, I just wanted to bring you up and kind of like, if you're at In-N-Out, definitely order a double with animal style fries. But
I wish we had In-N-Out down here in Florida, but Thursdays are my poker nights, so
oh, I see. Okay.
guys
Well,
to
I
hear it.
just wanted to bring you up here and kind of explain a little bit about what we've done and kind of reiterate on that. And we will continue to do content with you. And ultimately, I think you've been a good representative for the project. I actually think Action CEO has as well. And hopefully we'll get a chance to bring him up here and introduce him as well. All right. So that's pretty much it for our guests today and whatever. I'm going to open it up for Q&A, and we'll start right now with Sergeant Fluffy 16. Got to come to the stage.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
All right. Sorry, I'm at the gym. A question for you regarding support on the DIY miners. Now, obviously, we're not going to get first dibs on the support news. I do understand that. The question that I mainly had was you were saying about not really supporting 100% those with licenses. Now, I personally purchased a license, but I haven't had to enter anything in. So I'm wondering where the support is with that.
Okay, well, so first of all, let me be clear. We will, if you bought a license from us, we will support you. That's
Okay.
that's a guarantee. I mean, that's not even a question. But the deal is that with the basic license, there's not going to be any, really, big hurdle of support. It's just going to be a pretty standard. How do you forward your ports to a DIY? How do you set up your command line commands? There might be some, Docker stuff that we continue on. But look, a lot of that stuff is pretty well, that's territory that we've already well tread, and we'll just continue to put together materials to make that process easy. The other part of that question, though, is what is the priority order, and when will you be able to actually tie that license to something that matters? And right now, Cam, one of our front enders, is currently in the process. He's kind of got a bunch of back end and front end middle stuff, I guess really is the better description of it, to get our e-commerce site tied in with our back end databasing. And the next step then is to go ahead and turn on Keycloak accounting so that when you actually log into what we are calling console, the console is basically your master dashboard to everything that is Exa Net Services. And Exa Net Services encompasses relayers, it encompasses Exa miners, it encompasses all of the stuff that we call our access to the distributed data center, which is the SE Prime component. So that license key that you purchased needs to be tied together with a pub key, which is auto-generated when you first stand up your DIY provider. And that's a pretty easy process for us. It's just a simple database match. And ultimately, I think what we'll end up keying on is an email address so that when you sign in and set up an account, what will happen is then you will tie that pub key to the license key. And then the beautiful thing is, as you step up the ladder to the full licenses, you'll be able to have 4 or 5 examiners all under the same account. And when you log into the console, you'll be able to pull up all of the units right there in the console. and be able to make changes or monitor them. And you'll even be able to do some of that monitoring of the regular standard DIY command line licenses as well inside console. So there's going to be some good features for the basic CLI people. Mostly it's going to be the auto updated pricing and the re-announcing, but I do expect that you will be able to log into console and you will be able to see all your units in a single window and be able to go back and forth from one to the other to make changes or to do some stuff. Whether remote access is actually included in there or you have to be on the local network, I think it's the latter. But we'll see. As time goes by, we may ultimately, improve the capability for the CLI customer. Most likely, though, you're going to end up in a full version of the software. I'm just guessing, but I think that's what's going to end up happening with everybody. It may take some people a little longer to get there than others, but that's going to be a thing. And we will have a special discounted rebate version upgrade from the basic to the full version. It won't be the same that the guys in April got, but it will be a reasonably good discount. So there's my typical long-winded answer. Did it answer your question?
Yeah, it did. That's kind of all I was really trying to figure out, because I bought my basic license mid to early April. I set up my own DIY miner, got everything set up. I'm already announced and have already been receiving SCP for my monthly incentives. But whenever you were stating that there wasn't really going to be too much support, I'm like, no, wait a minute. I bought a license, but I haven't been able to do anything with it yet until you guys announce it. And that's perfectly fine. I was just trying to get some clarification.
Yeah, that will be the first shoe to drop. The actual connection of the CLI miner pub key with the license key will be the first thing we release, and that should actually be coming here within the next 1 to 2 weeks. Then after that, then we will begin to start talking about the whole full Examiner software launch, which will happen closer to the end of June. Right now we're targeting June 30th as the drop dead when you need to have, license purchased and everything, running. If it pushes a little further out than that, it does. It is what it is. The license keys are not now currently being set up to be annual renewals, so there's no time frame or anything that you lose out. And again, if you need tech support on the unit or anything like that, definitely feel free to ask, because if you bought a license, we're certainly going to support it. So there you go. Let's move on.
Perfect,
to, yep, thanks. Ball in a cup.
Hey, just real quick. So I just want to pass along to the community. Actually, Dude Stuff is the one that turned me on to this, to you guys and being able to get the XM Miner, and I absolutely love it. But I did have a question, and this is kind of based towards everybody. I don't want to take up a lot of time. Me and my buddy, I introduced my buddy to this project and told him about my XM Miner, and he was pretty impressed with it. We started discussing like a server wall, really kind of going heavy into this and really trying to put some money into building a server wall. I didn't know if a server wall would actually be plausible for this project or if I'm looking at it wrong. So I didn't know if anybody could reach out to me and maybe I can discuss it in more depth, or maybe if you had a quick summary of something that I could do with the server wall on this project.
So I think what I want to say there is a couple of things. Probably starting next week or the week after that, I will begin to start to talk a lot more about our partnering strategy. As many of you probably remember, Chaz, one of our stakeholders, came up a few weeks back and we talked a lot about some partner opportunities that we were going to offer. We actually have a program ready to roll. We still need to get a couple things in place, SLA and a few things along those lines. But we do actually have a partnering strategy ready to go. So for somebody who comes aboard and wants to do sort of a data center offering, more than just sort of like be an Uber driver or a Airbnb type host, The people that just want to buy 1 or 2 units, collect passive income, set it up, forget about it. I think those people will be the bread and butter of the project and ultimately will allow us to branch all over the world. And, that will be the customer type that ends up helping us get to 5, 7, 800,000 nodes all over the planet and so forth. But I think there's going to be a mid-tier of provider that will become important as time goes by. They aren't important today because there's no relayers out there that really, to speak of, that really can service them. But I think there's going to be a mid-tier of, data center types who bring on board a lot more capacity. They bring on more units per node, in a sort of single area. And once we start getting a lot of relayers out there, I think they will matter a lot. I think they will. I think there definitely will be a solid reason, for instance, to onboard all of the Chia data capacity once we're rolling with a lot of relayers. I think that's going to be a natural migration, by the way. I think that whole thing is going to just evolve over to our thing. You can hold me to that if you want, but we'll see. But what happens is if you stand up your own data center today, there aren't enough relayers. So what will end up happening is the relayer is only going to choose 2 instances behind a subnet. So if you had like 12 racks, only 2 per relayer would get chosen. And today there's only a couple of relayers out there feeding data into the network. So you may or may not see much data across all the nodes. But that's going to change really rapidly, or it's going to change semi-rapidly, let's say. By next year, it's probably going to go berserk. But over the next 2 quarters, we'll start to onboard all these individual customers. And as each individual customer comes on board, they have to stand up a relayer. And as they stand up a relayer, they have to go out and find providers to contract with. And what are they going to be looking for? They're going to be looking for bandwidth, and they're going to be looking for low latency. They're going to be looking for compliance. So somebody who's actually standing up 10, 20, 30, 50 nodes in a single facility is going to be well positioned to go ahead and dot all those I's and cross all those T's. So like if I stood up a provider right now in my domicile, I've got Xfinity. And so i.e. my internet sucks, right? So I got like 35 meg uploads purportedly. It's not really the case, but that's what they say I'm supposed to have. And I got gigabit download, which is just stupid. Ultimately, I think the ISPs will start to transition that on the residentials, but for at least the next year or so, we're probably going to be running into a lot of single and double nodes being really constrained on that side of the equation. Well, think about what that means. My upload speed is the customer's download speed. And the first time they actually need to download some data, the relayer is going to look at my instance and it's going to say, okay, well, you're really slow, so I'm going to find another one first. And then ultimately, if I end up continuing to provide the least performant downloads to them, I will ultimately not get picked to be involved in many provider sets. So over time, people are going to want to upgrade their internet. In the beginning, first year or two, what will end up happening is there won't be enough providers. So everybody will get data and it'll be good and doesn't matter what your speed is. And we'll have metrics that will show that our network's good, but not great. And then we'll have to find people like yourself who do stand up server racks and ultimately put in, symmetrical gigabit speeds or better, right? We talked about 3 weeks ago with Jay and Henry standing up a relayer and filling up a 2G pipe. So we can actually take advantage of some really extreme bandwidth if providers can add it to the equation. So that's what you're going to need to look for. Good high-speed internet access. And then ultimately, you're going to want to put up durability and accessibility. And yeah, I think that server racks are going to be and data centers are going to be a thing. I just don't know exactly when they start to become valuable, but I think, it's time to start talking about them. And I think over the next 2 to 3 quarters, I think, you're going to see several of them materialize as being very valuable components of our network.
All right. Well, hey, I definitely appreciate your time, man.
Thanks. Appreciate it. More questions? Oh, really? Is that true? 2 questions, 3 questions today? All right, that's fine. You know how much I like to hear my own voice. 18 spoons. There is no spoon.
Hello there. Real quick, did I hear you correctly that you may be sending out emails within the next few days?
I had hoped to do it on Monday. I have 40 to 50 units in stock ready to be sold immediately, and I really want to pull the trigger. I just actually signed the contract with our taxing entity before this show. I now have to essentially configure the e-commerce side of the house. That shouldn't take too awful long. And then here's what my plan is. So there's 15,000 names on that wait list. And what I'm going to end up doing is I'm going to run about a 50-50, 16-64 up to about 500 names. And then when we see how much uptake we get out of those 500 names, like if it's, 20% or 50% or 10% that convert into sales, then that will inform exactly what we end up doing next. So yes, the trigger's about to get pulled, but it isn't going to be we've really put a lot of energy into not repeating all of the negatives that happened in December. I mean, we got overwhelmed. It was clear we got overwhelmed. And then that forced us to limit ourselves to only 1,000 units. I could have taken probably 5,000 orders in December if we had been, able to take 5,000 orders, but we couldn't. So yes, I expect to pull the trigger. It'll be kind of a slow evolution.
I see. All right. Thank you.
Sure. Wait. Hey, we know you.
Hey, again, so I've actually got a question that's come in on Discord, which is quite a good question, I think. Maybe it's for Henry. Is on the relayers, is there a minimum number of providers that the customer needs to choose to upload their data to? Like, could they upload their data all to one provider, or does the relayer kind of enforce like a minimum of 10 or something?
So the very minimum that you could choose is, well, if we're using the technical terms, the data plus parity shards. You go with like a 30 and 60 scheme. That's something like 90 providers would be the very minimum that your relay would need to be matched to in order to operate. In reality, with like 4,000 providers on the network, unless you're using some really like exclusive parameters, like you're narrowing to one country, or you have like extremely high uptime requirements, you're probably going to wind up in a set that has in the hundreds or thousands of providers to choose from. So that's how it is for the most part. One of the things that we're kind of building out in the future is kind of more sophisticated expressions for how a relayer or how a customer could articulate the kinds of filters essentially that they want to provide. So we have a tagging system that we're kind of fleshing out now into the application, and that's going to allow for kind of another level of how that kind of system can work out. But I'd say at this point, yeah, for the most part, every relayer I would expect to be matched to hundreds or thousands of different providers. There's no way to just kind of narrow it to one, and that's a feature, not a bug.
Yeah, no, that's good. That's good. I kind of assumed it would work that way because it's very risky to just put all your data on one provider. Cool, thanks.
Yeah, this provider tagging is going to be a whole session one day soon, and we'll go through that really in depth because it's such a cool part of this thing. And I think that the numbers there that Henry just mentioned, actually, there should have been some surprises in people hearing those numbers, because our erasure coding is so different from like storage and Sia. It's so superior. And at the end of the day, the durability factors we're going to be bringing to the table by default are just insane. And ultimately, also by using all those providers, the latency and performance abilities that we're going to be able to cut down are really also going to be very much, I think, insane. It's a thing right now where I keep telling people I don't know if our thing actually works, but I kind of do. But I really don't yet have the ability to show that to people and say, look how this works. And that's coming over the next couple of weeks here as we do these onboards and really get these videos done. Because as you start to see our network in true operation and you see how a relayer works, you see what Singler and Chaz and some of these other people that have been running relayers see, and you understand how the erasure coding works, it's going to blow you guys away. I mean, it's really cool tech, and I think our devs have just hit it out of the park. So anyway, stay tuned. Info to come. Looks like we got another question in the interim. Sarah. Speak. Oh, might have been a misclick on the hand raise there. Let's see if he can unmute here. If not,
Oh, yeah. Can you hear me?
Yep, go ahead.
Oh, thanks. I just want to say congratulations on the launch. Long time fan of the project. You guys are doing an excellent job. Just wanted to know regarding the SPFs, is there any more information on the public sale for those?
It's definitely rising on the priority list. Nothing's really changed, obviously, in terms of a regulatory or a legalization. In fact, if anything, Do Kwon probably has made our lives a little bit more difficult, and that the SEC is quite likely to start to take sort of a view. But I've been actually doing some research and homework on some possible ways that we can offer those if we decide not to go with a Reg CF. Reg CF sales are essentially legal SEC sales of this kind of thing. Crypto doesn't like them. They think of it being sort of the old school thing. But, at the end of the day, it does work. It's legal, and it would allow us to get the units out there. We could do a straight ICO on, one of these platforms that we would essentially say whitelist all outside of the USA, so we wouldn't run afoul. But even then, there's some potential that we are running afoul because of we're in the United States, or at least some of us are in the United States. So that's tricky. I've also continued to look at things like Wormhole and a few other bridges so that we could perhaps wrap the token and then ultimately offer it on, Solana or another DeFi DEX, so that we could, get out there and get some liquidity and go that direction. To be honest with you, it's just such a crazy open puzzle. I don't know how much longer it's going to take before we actually bring them to the table. But I will tell you right now that I'm involved in a potential capital raise. I have two different paths that I'm embarking on there. Quite frankly, I don't think either of them are going to really pan out, but at the end of the day, that's okay. I'm going to sell Examiners here very shortly, and that's a way for us to generate operating capital. But I want to get through these two potentials, and if we get through these two, one way or the other, thumbs up, thumbs down by the end of May, then I will begin the process in earnest of figuring out exactly what the strategy is to offer the SPFs, because the SPFs need to get out there on the market sometime before the end of this year, because we need to have this token in place in case we need to change our consensus model for security purposes or for reasons related to protecting the project. Right now, still in pretty good shape as far as having 5-6 petahash of ASIC powered consensus miners. But with the price doing what it's doing, and with crypto threatening to go down to nothing, It's possible we lose, ASIC horsepower there, hash rate. And if we do, then the project becomes exposed again to a 51% attack. And if that's the case, then we really need to have that SPF out there as our staking token so that we can switch over to a proof of stake or a blended proof of stake, proof of work, something different than what we currently have that will more protect the project than a low hashed rate ASIC thing. So I know it's not an answer, but I think the answer in there was by the end of the year is pretty much a deadline that I've given myself.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it.
Sure. And we made it. Got to another end of one of these. I don't know how we keep doing it week in and week out, but we keep getting through them. So I really appreciate everybody showing up. I really appreciate the network the way it is. I'm going to keep bringing people up and introducing them to you. I know that you interact with them on a regular basis. I might do community managers next week. I don't know. We'll see what we end up. They're both actually here. So I guess the time works for them. We'll keep bringing people. We'll probably bring some customers up as we start to do this onboarding. We'll definitely start bringing up some people that are integrating. Juicy is somebody who's actually done a really good job with our software and is out supporting and building systems. So we're going to validate him probably first as a manufacturer, and that's probably going to happen here over the next probably 4 to 6 weeks. So that when we get to the June 30th launch, he's ready to go as being a validated, powered by guy. If you're somebody who wants to build systems and be validated, you definitely should get in contact with me. We'll probably bring him up into a future one of these, and I'm wide open to suggestions. If you know of anybody else who really should be on stage and chatting with the community, definitely position them, and we'll see about setting up a meet with them on stage talking to you. Other than that, thanks for coming. We'll see you next week.